it's one of the beautiful things that we have on this earth that provides sustenance to our species. And I think we need to cultivate it, and I think we need to go back to it. We need to go back to what was natural, what was normal 1,000, 2,000 years ago, and that is milk and dairy products.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast.
Dairy farmer Dwayne Faber grew up in the same community as me, but we went to different schools, so I never knew him. He's got thousands and thousands of followers on Twitter, hilarious tweets, and a lot of people know him for that, as well as his dairy farming and his involvement in the farming community. But I wanted to get to know him and what makes him tick. Why does he do what he does? And some of the things that he shares on podcasts and other things that he's been able to do because of the exposure of his Twitter following have been pretty cool. So we had him here on the podcast, went to his farm in Skagit County, Washington. This is the Real Food, Real People podcast. I'm Dylan Honcoop, and these are our continuing conversations to get to know the real people behind our food here in Washington State. So why do you do it?
Why do I do it?
Yeah, like you grow milk.
I grow milk. I'm too dumb to do anything else. No, I love farming. I love the connection that farming allows to have to animals, to soil, and to people. And there's something human, there's something ethereal about providing food for people that is satisfying in a way that not every industry has.
So how much food do you produce for people? Would there be a way to even quantify that?
Ooh, we could calculate it out. It would take a it would take a calculator. It would take a calculator.
Yeah, my brain doesn't have one of those.
Right. It
Yeah.
Well, if you do a cheese conversion, it would be about 6,000 to 7,000 pounds of cheese a day. So we can do that. So divided by a 5-pound loaf. Yeah, pretty substantial. So yeah, quantifying like that, I've never done that, but that's a little crazy when you think about it.
When you think about it, you're a person who produces food. And I think you've talked about this before. You know, like, how many people are you actually feeding?
Right.
You know, in some of your social media posts. We're going to get into your social media habits eventually.
Right. Love this.
So just be forewarned. But first, tell us about your farm.
You bet. So I have a dairy farm in Skagit Valley. We milk about 900 to 1,000 cows on that dairy there, and we have about 400 cows on a dairy in Astoria, Oregon, where we ship to Tillamook Cheese. And then the dairy in Washington, obviously, we ship to Dairy Gold, and Dairy Gold does a lot of fluid milk and sour creams, and then Tillamook is more known for the cheese, obviously, and they've kind of diving into some other products like ice cream and not sour cream, but cream cheese has been real popular. So yeah, it's fun to go to a grocery store and kind of see your products just sitting there in the store as people pick them up and use them. So it's pretty invigorating.
What's your favorite dairy product? I was going to say it's cheesy to ask that, and then I realized that's a terrible pun, so I won't say it's cheesy, but it is. But I'm still going to put you on the spot.
Absolutely. I think it has to be cheese, right? I mean, there was some study that came out, like there's some correlation between cheese and drugs. Like the reaction the human body has to eating cheese is actually some sort of euphoria and high that in a small way that is achieved by caffeine or
burst of endorphins.
Absolutely.
From the cheese.
Get our happy cheese.
No wonder I love cheese so much.
All is right with the world again.
Yeah. I mean, people say that about chocolate too, but I'm not as much of a chocolate person.
Right.
I take cheese over chocolate.
Ooh.
To some people, that's blasphemy. But
I think I would as well. Yeah. And cheese was actually one of the first ways that they preserved milk, right? And historically, the human species and population expanded on their stomachs. Like a lot of people died because they didn't have enough food. Well, the way that you go from being hunter-gatherers is you have a herd of cows that follows you around to provide milk year-round, and then you have too much milk, so the way to preserve that is to store it in the form of cheese. and you can preserve those calories for a later date. And that was one of the ways they used to preserve milk products, and grow populations. And the dairy cow has a very important part in world history and global population.
Well, milk and cheese, as you're describing, I mean, that even played a role in like these wars of antiquity in some cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like defining who was able to win or lose.
That's right. Well, and milk has also been attributed to growth, like bone structure, and allowing for, as you and I both know, we come from Holland. Holland is known for their love of dairy products. They've actually birthed or started the Friesian cow, the Holstein cow, and they're known as being some of the tallest people in the world, right? And is it correlation or causation? I would beg that it is a direct result of the dairy industry and allowing that nutrition.
Well, the health of a society is largely governed by its food.
Yep, absolutely right.
Makes you wonder what's going to happen with our society, because we seem to be getting away from those real, basic, simple, nutritious foods that,
Yep.
A lot of things seem to happen to the things that we eat after they leave the farm.
No, exactly, right? And we were actually discussing earlier, going back to how humankind, how they source their calories historically, and it doesn't look anything like the diet that we eat today. And I think at some point we're going to wake up and realize that, hey, this isn't healthy. We need to go back to what we did consume and used to consume. And I think that would be good for all of us to go back and reevaluate.
Well, there's a trend out there, though, that milk would be on that list of what isn't healthy, and that, milk is cows producing for their young, and humans shouldn't be drinking it because that's not the what nature intended. What do you say to that?
Nature didn't intend for us to fly on airplanes and go to Hawaii once a year either. And here we are. I mean, and to go and say that we're the only species that consumes milk, that's inaccurate. Dogs love cow milk, cats love cow milk, right? And it's one of the beautiful things that we have on this earth that provides sustenance to our species. And I think we need to cultivate it, and I think we need to go back to it. We need to go back to what was natural, what was normal 1,000, 2,000 years ago, and that is milk and dairy products.
Heck, 100 years ago.
Right. We've shifted again, right? And so no, it's interesting, and yeah, we'll see what that change looks like, and if society does come around to that.
Why do you think there is that narrative that, drinking milk is bad, eating meat is bad, all of these things that on one hand are, the claim is that it's about making us healthier and better and more sustainable and all of that, but really it's taking us away from the direction that humankind was on for a long time.
There is a narrative out there that animal agriculture is bad for the climate. Now, I would say that there's a symbiotic relationship and an ecosystem where cows can be a part of this chain. For me, a lot of our dairy manure is utilized to grow crops of the organic crops, organic Brussels sprouts, organic cauliflower, and it allows these organic farmers to utilize the nutrients that are in dairy manure and not have to apply synthetic fertilizers to their crops. And we're part of an ecosystem that is good for the soil, it's good for the environment, and it gets people away from having to truck in the nutrients that they need in order to grow these organic crops. And I think if people understood that, they would realize that milk and meat then is not as bad for the environment as people think that it is. And ergo, if you do believe that cows are bad for the environment, you are going to spend money to infiltrate studies. You're going to change the food pyramid. You're going to push a narrative that, these foods that you normally eat, vegetables and meat, are no longer healthy. We're going to push more processed foods, and that is going to be better for the environment. And if you believe that humans are the virus and we need to eliminate humans, that you don't care about the health of the human. Mother Earth is all and is everything.
That's true. You can't really at the same time say humans are the problem, but here's what everyone needs to do to be healthier. Like, wait a second, there's a disconnect there.
That's right. No, exactly. If you believe humans are the problem, you're going to go out and give advice that only benefits Mother Nature. Well, if that means eliminating foods that you deem as bad for Mother Nature and are also bad for humans, you've actually accomplished a double whammy. You've kind of expedited your process of reducing the human impact on the globe. And I think that's where a lot of that narrative comes from. And I don't want to sound too crazy town, but there is that belief and there is that narrative out there being pushed by a lot of groups.
Well, and you touched on something a minute ago that I always think about, but it's because I grew up around this, and I'm continue to be more and more fascinated about it. I mean, it's related to soil health, but it's this whole cycle of nutrients. And like you said, if you're going to grow veggies, which a lot of people hold up veggies, oh, that's healthy, oh, that's better for the environment. I'd say that's debatable when you look at the real facts and the real impacts of how they're grown or whatever. But regardless, it requires nutrients to grow those. So where are they going to come from? Animal manure or synthetic fertilizer? Those are your kind of two big options. I read an article recently about like vegan farming, where they didn't want to have any animal products involved because I guess the narrative is that's exploitation to use animals' manure to grow vegetables. So what's the option there then? Mm-hmm. Synthetic fertilizer, which is made out of oil, fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people I don't think they realize that's the choice. There is no other middle road there of like, where else is your nutrient going to come from?
No, exactly right. And there is a war going on right now on fertilizer. I mean, we're seeing it in Holland in particular, where they're going and saying you're not allowed to apply any more fertilizers to the soil because the nitrogen levels are too high. Well, they're a vast food producing nation.
Yeah.
And they're being forced now to reduce their food output, which is going to have an impact on our global food supply. And it's possible in 1 or 2 years that we are in a calorie deficit world. And for the people at the top, that doesn't make a difference in their life. It's the people at the bottom that can't afford to feed themselves and rely on the excesses of these other countries in order to survive and feed their people. And we are going to see a lot of turmoil. I mean, the Arab Spring was a result of wheat prices going way too high. And governments were overthrown. And that's just starting to happen now and will continue to happen as you have food that is just, it's untenable for people on the bottom rungs of society. And we're heading for a pretty scary time. And it's hard to look at some of the decisions being made and think that there is not a cohesive thought or group behind it, because a lot of these narratives made in the vein of we're saving the climate are going to starve and kill people. And the next 1 or 2 years will be very telling.
That's scary. That's a scary prediction.
Yeah. I hope I'm wrong, but we're starting to Sri Lanka. They're starting to people in the streets, right? We're also seeing. I mean, we got a scary situation in Europe. Europe now, are they going to be able to afford to heat their homes? They're running out of gas and oil, right? And you have Germany, which was completely altruistic. We're going to switch to windmills and we're going to get rid of nuclear, and all of a sudden now people are chopping firewood and buying wood-burning stoves because they don't want to die of cold in the winter. And it's one thing to...
I hear it gets cold in Germany in the winter.
It does. That's why they have such a good bobsled team.
Yeah.
Right, and so we're heading into some pretty uncharted territories, and it'll be interesting to see where it all goes. But yeah,
I think there's a lot of talk about fossil fuels and climate change, energy, and a lot of these things that you're mentioning. And I think the part that's just kind of coming into view that it's mixed up in all of this is food.
Yes,
food is a part of this whole equation as well. Like food, shelter. Yeah,
100%. And I mean, the lifeblood for food is fertilizer. You cannot grow crops in soil that has been depleted of all of its resources.
Fertilizer, either organic manure fertilizer or synthetic petroleum-based
Exactly
fertilizer.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And that is the lifeblood. And any attacks on that or increased cost of that, which what we're seeing now currently is the prices of fertilizer have just exploded. And that has to be passed on to the consumer. And it's still 6 to 8 months away for the consumer to feel the full impact of that as you go through these growing cycles. But no, food insecurity is going to become more and more of a conversation.
Back to this nutrient cycle, I just had this kind of light bulb realization. I mean, with cows, cows eat grass that have nutrients in them. They produce food with that people eat, and they produce manure. The manure, the nutrients in that manure then go back into the soil. They feed the soil feeds the crop, which feeds the cow, and it goes around and around. In some ways, it's a closed loop, except for those nutrients that leave in the food that they produce that we consume. It's humans that don't have a closed loop at all.
Yeah.
Because honestly,
right.
We eat stuff, it goes out of the system. Where does it go?
Right.
By and large, I mean, it's very rare for that to go back in. I don't want to get into the biosolids debate or anything, but I really think it should be thought about, talked about. I mean, most of it goes into a river and or directly into the ocean, or, the river takes it to the ocean, and that's where all those nutrients end up from the human populations. Or put into the ground somewhere.
Right. Yep.
So what's really more sustainable?
Right. And I think that's also a dangerous road to go down, because if you come to the realization that humans don't contribute anything, then your value of human life goes down. And to me, that's a dangerous road to go down too. And to me, humans, we were created and we are part of a global good that is contributing to this society and this world, and there's human capital. But you talk about, manure and sewage going out. There was just an article that broke in San Francisco. They're getting massive algae blooms in the San Francisco Bay.
Yep.
And it's a result of their sewage treatment plant not doing a good enough job. And the cost to rebuild and bring it up to specs and standards would be $14 billion. And they know it's an ongoing problem, and they're just kind of sweeping it under the rug and ignoring it. And that is something that in the dairy community, if we were knowingly pumping that type of manure into a waterway where there would be algae blooms, we would be out of business. We'd be sued out of business. We'd be taken out, and yet because it is all of us, then we ignore it and it's no longer a problem. And that, to me, that's incredibly frustrating.
Well, and I appreciate what you brought up about humanity, not to say that, humanity's bad and play into this worldview that says humanity is the blight, they're the problem. I don't even want to get into that because that's heavy duty stuff. But just, with a knee jerk of, it must be, cows that are the problem. Well, maybe we should take a closer look at what we're contributing as humans through the systems that we just kind of take for granted. They're transparent to us. Again, sewage treatment. How often do people think about the nutrients that they consumed and then left their body? Let's not get too graphic about it, but
that's right. And to me, the dairy cow is unique and special, right? And the beef cow, certainly, I think it's justified, but the dairy cow provides milk for 80% of its life, and at the very end of its life, it provides meat into the system. Right. And when you do a scorecard of what is the carbon footprint of each animal, to me, the dairy cow provides the lowest carbon footprint because you have so much output continually every day from the dairy cow where it's providing nutrients for humanity. And to me, it's one of the most efficient carbon converters. So, I'm obviously pro dairy cow, but that's I'm excited about it.
Well, this must be what you think about when you're out in the field or in the barn.
Certainly.
Time to process all these big, heady ideas.
That's right. Yeah, solve all the world's problems, and it starts and ends with a dairy cow.
Just a quick time out here on the Real Food, Real People podcast to thank our sponsors, Dairy Farmers of Washington, for one, supporting what we do here and sharing stories of dairy farmers like Dwayne and so many others that are focused on sustainability, health, and nutrition, of the quality dairy products that they produce right here in Washington State. They're known worldwide, and you can find out so much more about that at waddairy.org. A ton of great resources for you to see there. Again, Dairy Farmers of Washington. Thanks to them for supporting the podcast. Also, Mana Insurance Group, helping help you come up with a plan to protect your financial future, I guess is how I should say it. That's what it's really about, is making sure that you aren't financially devastated by the unknown in the future, and that you aren't just left picking up the pieces. And I think some people think about insurance that way. They don't think about it that way. They want to be proactive rather than reactive. Check them out online, manainsurancegroup.com. It's a firm that was started by a high school classmate of mine, a guy I really trust and think very highly of, as well as many people on his team. He's got a great team, and they operate now here in Washington, as well as in California and Arizona. Also, Washington Red Raspberries, sponsoring the podcast this season again, and we really appreciate them. Of course, I grew up around Washington Red Raspberries. My dad was on the board of Washington Red Raspberries for a long time, and they continue to do a great job of producing the best red raspberries, I believe, and I'm biased for a variety of reasons, the best anywhere in the world. They call themselves America's Red Raspberries. And you can check them out, Red Raz, online, redraz.org. Check it out, Washington Red Raspberries. Thanks to them for supporting these conversations here on the Real Food, Real People podcast. Now back to the Skagit Valley and our conversation with Dwayne Faber. Well, what do you do on the farm? You get your hands dirty much?
Yeah, a little.
Are you the head honcho that's,
Right. Well, every time I touch a piece of equipment, it dies. So I'm not trusted with any of that. But
I thought I saw you do a live on, I want to say it was back in the Periscope days, where you were out pumping manure, live streaming on the internet.
That could be correct. I get put on a tractor that's going about 2 miles an hour, and that's all I'm allowed to drive. So
spreading those good nutrients.
That's right. We're spreading nutrients out. We're part of that cycle, just upcycling nutrients. So I'll do some of that, but it's a lot of putting out fires. I do have to go back and forth between Washington and the dairy in Oregon. I've got great managers down in Oregon. They do a good job. But yeah, with a dairy farm, there's always something going wrong. I mean, you deal with cows, machinery, and people. You're bound to have a problem just about every day, and we see all tenets of that. So, no, there's always something to do and fill in. I still milk cows when I have to, and feed cows when I have to, and just try and keep the ball rolling on all of it. So
the stereotype is that dairy farmers in particular, and I just know this because I grew up in the dairy community, that is that either a dairy farmer is a crop guy or a cow guy.
Ooh, yes.
The stereotypically, they're wired in a way where they're interested in the crops and they're not so much into caring for the animals,
yes,
or vice versa. Which are you?
I'd be on the cow side. There's something about seeing like a correctly formed cow that has a nice udder that's going to produce a lot of milk. That's what gets me excited. That's what gets me up in the morning. Seeing a nice cow gets me excited, and the crop side not as much.
So you like working with animals?
I do. Yeah, they try and kill you at times, but we better not anthropomorphize animals too much, because they still do have a wild nature to them. But no, I do love working with cows. I love that aspect of the business, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, and see, that's the part that I'm not a dairy farmer, but if I were, that would be my least favorite part.
You'd be the tractor guy.
Yeah. They're, cows are unpredictable.
Right.
They have a mind of their own.
Well, they do.
They want to do various things, and it's not always what I would want to be doing.
Right.
That just upsets me. I want plants. They stay in one spot.
Yes.
Until you come and harvest them.
Right. Well, I've got a wife and 3 daughters, so I'm used to instability.
Well, I'm with you in the 3 daughters club.
You are?
So,
yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah.
So yeah. I know how that goes. Granted, we don't have a dairy farm to keep them busy all the time, but
you've got a tractor you can put them on, and
and the flower farm and the cats and the dogs.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
yeah.
Or ship them down to Grandpa's place.
Okay, that'll work. Yeah.
You grew up in the same area as me, though, not Skagit County, where you're at right now.
That's right. Grew up in the Sumas area, and then up to Everson. Lived there from probably 10 to 18, but 0 to 10, we were in the Sumas area there.
Dairy farming the whole time.
Yeah, with my parents. Yep, you bet. Yep.
How many generations back in the Faber blood does the farming go?
So my dad was the first one. He was the patriarch. Yeah, he started it, grew up. Grandparents immigrated, and Grandpa worked at a Keeler Brass. It was a car manufacturing place, I believe, in Detroit.
Wow.
And then they moved out here, and Dad started out on his own. Grandparents on my mom's side, Bradenhoff, he was a dairy farmer in British Columbia, Canada, and then all of that family farms as well and dairies as well. But yeah, no, he was the first one. I'm the second, and we'll see where it goes.
What stories does he tell? What was that like being the first one in the family?
Right.
To me, that'd be pretty intimidating.
Yes.
Because it's like you don't have like, hey, Dad, how do you do this? Or you didn't grow up necessarily doing it day to day, so you just have some of these kind of natural, basic knowledge of how stuff works.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was a whole leap of faith, right? In going into an industry that, he didn't know outside of being a young man working for a neighboring farmer and deciding that he liked it and wanted to do that. And so, no, it was a big leap of faith to make that jump. And no, it's worked out well. He's survived. It's been a tough industry.
Yeah.
But he's gotten through it. He's been able to provide for his kids and his wife, and then seeing it continue on with myself. And so, no, there's joy in that. There's pleasure in seeing and I think he would say too, just seeing your kids doing well and excelling in life. And for him as a Christian, seeing them in their faith and walking with the Lord, that's his greatest joy. And I think farming allowed him to do that. It provided for that lifestyle, for that family. And it was never about, getting the beach house and, the trips to Hawaii. And, it was all survival. And,
how many times did you go to Hawaii growing up?
We didn't go to Hawaii.
Same here.
No.
0.
Right. Or
I didn't
Disneyland.
go there until I was an adult. And I'm
Right.
like, wow, so this is what people have been talking about.
This is how you live. This is how you live.
Unreal.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. So, no, farming has been great for us. It's been a great career path. It's also, like I said, it provides that humbling experience where you can do everything right and it still go wrong. And so it keeps you centered. It keeps you grounded. And then I think it also gives you the satisfaction of a job well done after a hard day's worth of work, right? And that is satisfying, and I think you learn to take joy and pleasure in the small things, and when things do go well and do go right, that's what provides the job satisfaction and life satisfaction.
What were the hardest times? You said it wasn't without struggle.
Right. I think the biggest thing is financial, right? You go through, there's periods in time in dairy farming where the bills are greater than the milk check, right? And the market doesn't care if you make money or not. We get a price for our milk at the end of the month, and sometimes we spent more money to make that milk than what the milk check allowed us to go with. And that has been probably the biggest stress or struggle. We see environmental challenges where we're told, hey, you're doing a terrible job and you're bad for the climate. And that's not the narrative that I believe in my heart. And the people side can still be frustrating. You work with people, and people are ugly business, right? Being an employer wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the people. And, you just deal with the oscillations of the humankind. And to me, being an employer is like high school, but with money. You deal with all of the same things.
Drama.
That's right. It does. And yet then there's things where, you have an employee that struggles. We had an employee that had cancer, and we go above and beyond. We help them out. You help them out and you give them a paycheck for a year and a half while they're getting cancer treatments, that kind of stuff where you can spread that around and you can help someone with the things that you've been given and you've been blessed with. And that provides the joy, right? When you can help those around you. And
farming tends to be more of like a family endeavor, whether it is actual blood family or people that work with you who are not related at all, but they're on your team.
That's right.
And that's why I hear farmers say so many times, it's like the crew, our workers, they're like family. We just do this together, and our kids, our parents, our employees, we're all working together to make this whole thing happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I think camaraderie comes about when you go through struggle. I mean, it was no different than when I was on the fire department, right? And when you go through something traumatic as a firefighter, you build a bond with somebody that you wouldn't ever have outside of that, right? And people experience that being in the military. They experience that, I mean, probably in any industry where you have real struggle and you have enemies or, there's something cohesive about standing shoulder to shoulder beside somebody else and working hard to get it done. Or, I mean, whether it's an employee and you working hard to pull a calf out that's too big for the mother and then seeing a live baby calf, right? That provides joy, that provides a bond between you and your employee that, you can't get, just rubber stamping a piece of paper and moving it to the next guy.
Clock in, clock out. I made my widgets for the day.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So those joys, right? Those are the wins that I think invigorate a lot of farmers through the hard times.
Yeah. Thinking back, like when you were a kid, what were the hard times like? What was the toughest? What was going on? And what were you thinking at that time?
The crazy thing as a kid was we did all the milkings ourselves. And so every afternoon we would have to leave wherever we were at 2:00 p.m. to go back and milk the cows. And we would have to leave the birthday party. We would have to leave the lake outing with friends and family. We'd have to leave. And it instilled in me, like, at the time I was frustrated with it. I was angry that we had to always be home milking the cows, tending the cows, taking care of the cows. And yet I think those were the formative years that teaches you a work ethic, and it teaches you that when there's an animal to be cared for, you go and you take care of it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I don't think can be taught in school. It's just something that you have to live through and experience. And I've structured my life now so that I can be free at 2:00. But I'm grateful for those struggles where through that childhood, I thought that was struggle when it really wasn't. And yet outside of that, I think kids are resilient. I mean, kids don't need the fancy toys to be happy. I mean, we had so much joy in swimming in the creek and, jumping out of hay mows, and we didn't have an Xbox. We didn't have, the trip to Hawaii, and yet we didn't know we were lacking a thing. We were completely content, and I think kids especially don't know what they don't know, and quite frankly, I think their threshold for what happiness is a lot lower than what parents think it needs to be. Outside of, to me, time and input of parents and living in a loving home, but outside of that, kids can find entertainment just about anywhere.
What was that like growing up then and becoming your own farmer, kind of stepping out from under your dad's wing?
Yep. Yeah, it was scary. It was the most scary on that first day when you start, right? You jump out and you just went and bought 100 cows, and you think, somebody says, "Oh, you way overpaid for them." You got screwed on that. That right away.
Thanks, naysayers. It's too late now.
Right.
I got to do this.
Right. We're kind of committed. Exactly right. So that was probably the biggest part, was the starting up phase where you're like, gosh, what are we getting into? Where is this thing going to go? And then it ebbs and flows through all that time, right? You got struggles with crops, you have struggles with employees and financial, and yet for us, the Lord's provided. We've survived. We've gotten to a point where it's still a struggle, and it will be for some time, but we enjoy it. We enjoy the struggle, and yeah.
How did that go that you moved what you were doing to Skagit County? Because you used to be in Whatcom County, one county north.
Yeah. So we were on a 250 cow dairy in Whatcom County, and land prices there were way too high. And there was kind of a movement to go to leasing facilities, buying the cows, and leasing the ground around them. And it allowed you to have a more sustainable business, a larger business where you could capture some efficiencies on labor, some efficiencies on buying feed. And there was a place that came up for rent in Skagit County, and I recognized, hey, that's going to be more opportunity in that than there is in buying a smaller dairy in Whatcom County. So convinced my dad that we should do it, and he signed the bank note, and he agreed to support me in that. And went on my own down here in 2009, got married the same year. And we've kept both of them going, so that's been good. So, no, we came down here, we rented this place, and then in 2016, we went and rented another dairy. So we had 2 dairies. And then, it felt like things were heading a tough direction. You know, we're seeing a lot of dairy farms go out of business. We're at the end of the railroad for corn and soybeans. We have high feed costs. Labor costs are way too high here on this side of the state. Our competitors in the Midwest are paying employees less, so their labor costs are a lot lower. And in my mind, looking around, Tillamook paid their farmers and allowed farmers to be a smaller size and make money. And after much prayer and talking about it, we decided that, hey, for us to sustain and keep going, we needed to look outside of Dairygold and outside of Washington. And we decided to buy the dairy down in Tillamook or in Astoria. So, yeah.
How's that been going? That's a heck of a commute.
It is. Yeah. No,
How often do you go down there?
I do 1 trip a week. So I do 1 trip a week and then do it 1 overnight. And it's gone well. It's not always easy being that far away, but a lot of communication to key employees down there helps. And you have to learn to trust people and allow people to do their job and give them space to do it, and then provide encouragement and also instruction when things aren't the way they should be. But no, it's gone well being down there.
What's the difference between doing business and farming in Washington versus Oregon now?
Certainly the environmental is easier down in Oregon. They have a CAFO permit down there, which everybody's required to get, that has not been pierced, and there has, to my knowledge, has not been any farms that have been sued out of business based on any manure indiscretions. And yet in Washington, there's been environmental lawyers going after many farms in Washington and push several out of business. And that has not happened down there.
But do you think dairies in Washington are more protective of the environment because of that? Or what?
Not necessarily. No, I think the people down there care immensely. And yet they have the confidence that, hey, not only are we doing a good job, we're recording it, and this program is keeping us accountable. We're also not under this threat every day of being sued out of business and having everything we worked for go down the drain to some corporate lawyer that's just looking to take everything we own and everything we worked for.
So that's the situation in Washington.
It would appear to be that way. Yeah.
And why? That's because of how state regulation of dairy farming is structured?
I believe there has not been a large acceptance of the CAFO permit in Washington State because it is incredibly onerous, and because of the setbacks that it requires and some of the times where you're allowed and not allowed to apply the nutrients to the soil. So very few people have signed up for it. There are also, you might be able to speak to it better than me, but there have been instances where people thought that they were protected or they were working with government agencies, and these government agencies essentially took all the data they had and just turned around and gave it to corporate lawyers that then sued them into oblivion. And so there's this massive distrust of government agencies because they haven't had our back when they've said they have our back.
Yeah. And it should be ultimately about protecting the environment, not about the gamesmanship of who wins or who loses in a courtroom. Like,
certainly.
Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
But the point, the spirit of the law is we're going to protect our streams and protect our soil and the ecosystems and all that. So how are we going to accomplish that? And it sounds like in some ways, just to totally dumb it down, for lack of a better term, here in Washington, it's like they've overshot. Like they're pushing too hard. They're asking for too much. It's too difficult.
Yeah.
And that's where the perfect becomes the enemy of the good. as I often say. And then you have fewer people actually proactively engaged in the process of doing the things that they need to do because, yeah.
There's an interesting concept actually in tax law, and there's an allegory to this in that something called the Laffer Curve, where the government can go and implement a 90%, 100% tax on its people, but they will collect zero money because nobody will pay taxes, right? And there's a happy medium in there somewhere where somebody's like, okay, I'm willing to give up 28.5%,
right?
But as soon as it hits 70%, I'm just not going to pay my taxes.
Yeah.
And you can have that in dairy farming too. When you push the dairy farmer away from the table and you say, we're going to make life so miserable you can't even be in business, that you get zero buy-in. And that's a dangerous place to be too. And you want to have all sides at the table, right? And that means not having a governor going out and saying that, hey, we're going to take all the floodwater areas and plant trees and commandeer all this land and make it for the state, riparian buffers.
Yeah.
I mean, farmers don't get consulted. Farmers are not at the table, and there is no desire to even have a discussion with farmers. And to me, that environment is an environment that doesn't have your best interest or the environment's best interest in their heart. It's all about greed. It's all about power. It's about control. And it's about pushing farmers away from the table. And to me, that's an incredibly sad and dangerous state of affairs. And I think salmon has become a political football. I think water has become a political football. And, I mean, we live in an area with 60, 80 inches of rain a year of rain, right? And why we're having these water fights is staggering, is shocking, and yet if you follow the money, you get the answer rather quickly, right? And who has the money and who's benefiting from these fights?
Yeah. Oh, with water, I mean, we're unlike many, many other places that have water fights because we here in Northwest Washington have enough water. It just comes down to who gets it, how is it managed, is it being managed responsibly, sustainably, and equitably? And that's what the fights are over, which in other areas, like down in the Klamath, they say, that's crazy. Why are you guys fighting? Just figure it out. You have enough. Just figure it out.
Yeah. No, we live in a beautiful place. We've got a lot of amazing people here. We're all just trying to work together, and it would be nice to be included in the discussion when we have a lot invested in the land around here, in the facilities around here, and in the interest of the soil providing for us, our families, and future generations. And we just want to be at the table. And quite frankly, a lot of times we're not invited to the table.
Yeah. Well, here in Western Washington, there's only so much soil to farm, and most of it's being farmed right now.
That's right.
So if you trash your farm, trash your soil,
right?
What are you going to have in 50 years?
That's right.
What are your kids going to have?
Yeah. Well, I mean, eventually it just gets paved over, right? And that's unfortunate, but that is the alternative. Unless you decide that you make it all a sanctuary and you just plant trees and have massive buffers and.
I've gotten into the numbers on that though.
Oh,
if you do that,
tell me more.
If you do that, and the American Farmland Trust has data on this, if you no longer farm land profitably, it can be as much as 70 times more likely to be developed.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
No matter what the intent is, in the long run, that ground is a sitting duck for pavement. Because somebody, somewhere, with money or clout or both,
right,
is going to work it so they can put some pavement on there and make some money on that land.
That's right. Yeah.
Versus it being farmed, at least in a way that maybe sometimes pays the bills. That staves that off.
Certainly. Yep. No, and you can keep going down the rabbit hole, right? But if we want to take climate change seriously, we want local food. We want our potatoes to come from Skagit County. We want our milk to come from Skagit County. We want our Brussels sprouts to come from Skagit County, right? We don't want it to be trucked in from Pennsylvania.
Or flown in from who knows where.
Right. Central America.
Shipped.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And so part of that cohesive relationship is having local food. And part of local food is having farms in your backyard. And that's not something that people want. And you can't have it both ways. And at the end of the day, the good news about something that's unsustainable is it won't sustain itself, right? I just hate for us to at one point realize that the vast majority of our food is coming from other countries. And then we wake up one day and we realize that food is a national security issue. And we don't have the ability now to grow some of these foods that we've wanted in the past. And that is a fear. And I think COVID actually showed us that. And we're seeing that continually as we have supply chain issues and a lot of these outside of even the ag world, computer chips coming back to the States, right? A lot of these industries that we historically pushed out to other countries are now coming back because we realize that if we don't have them, we're in a hurting unit. I mean, we got a problem. So I'm excited to see that where people, maybe COVID gave us the wake up call to say, hey, if we want these things, if we want to go to a grocery store and have all of these things produced in our backyard at the lowest carbon footprint possible, we need to get behind local agriculture and we need to support it.
So you are, let's say, pretty, what's the right word, prolific on particularly Twitter with your posting, and humor generally is kind of your thing.
Yes.
How'd that get started?
How did that get started? I had a tweet in 2014 or 15 and it just blew up and it just went crazy.
How long had you been on Twitter before then?
Oh, not long at all. So I had just gone on just kind of the quiet stalker type. And then I had posted
Which is
something.
most people.
Well, it is the vast majority, certainly.
Yeah.
Right. And then, and it's a little weird. Twitter, you're like, shouting something out into the ether, right? Like who is seeing it? It's such an odd concept. And that blew up, right? And then on the back end, you look, and it was like, man, 50,000 people saw this. This is crazy. Like, what a medium, right? What a megaphone to get out. And so it was always something that I like to have fun with, and put out something silly, put out something funny, use humor to kind of get my narrative, my message across. And then I saw the Netflix show Social Dilemma. And it was a little bit scary going through that, right? Where when the product is free, then you are the product. And all of this social media is designed to be addictive and suck people in and kill time and waste time. And so I've had a little bit of an awakening through that where it's like, man, how healthy is this, right? And there's certainly, and the social media experiment is new, right? We don't know what the impact is. We're just getting started on this, and we'll see where it all goes. But I took pause after that a little bit, but it's been a fantastic medium to meet amazing people. I've enjoyed that part of it where you meet people on Twitter in particular. It's hard to hide crazy on Twitter or maybe that's the right place for it. I don't know. But if you continually follow someone on Twitter, you kind of get a feel for their thought process, no different than podcasting, right? And so there's a little bit of a connection where you feel like you know someone.
Have you exposed your crazy?
I as
Has
often
brought it out of you.
Yeah, that's right. As often as possible. As often as possible. Right. And so it's fun to just put yourself out there, and it's a great way to get messaging across.
If you're on there, how are you coming up with, because you're like the king of the one-liner.
Oh goodness.
At least in ag Twitter.
Right.
I will say.
Yeah.
And how many followers do you have there, by the way?
It's like 43,000, I think.
Yeah. So it's a lot of people.
But like Elon says, they're like 80% bots.
Well, whatever the true number is, there's a lot of people paying attention regardless.
Right.
But how do you come up with stuff? How do you compose that tweet? Have you always considered yourself a humorist?
A little bit, but to me, so much of Twitter, and I love the English language. My mother was an English teacher, and there's something about Twitter where it forces you to synthesize a thought into a small package, and you want to have like a mic drop moment when you're composing a tweet where all of a sudden people are like, boy, I didn't think it was going to go there. And then it went there. Right. And that is fun, where you go and you take something innocuous and you say, well, how can I make this funny, or how can I turn this around or surprise people?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not easy for everyone to do that or come up with that. And I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed that part of it. And
what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, is it like you're working around the farm doing stuff, and all of a sudden something pops in your mind like, that's kind of ludicrous. What if I wrote it this way, and it would point out how ridiculous it is and people would laugh?
That's
versus like, okay, I'm going to write something funny. What's funny?
Right. I think it's 50-50, because I'll have it where I'm sitting drinking my coffee and just staring at the wall, and my wife's like, you're trying to come up with a tweet, aren't you? I'm like, yeah, I am.
Now the truth comes out.
Right, exactly. But then it's just like your daily life. There's so many things in it where you're like, oh, that's kind of silly, or that's kind of funny. You know, and I've actually had that thought pre-Twitter where you have a thought and you're like, boy, that's kind of funny. I wish I could share that with a whole bunch of people, because, you know, it's a crazy thought. Well, social media has allowed people to do that and put that out there. And I mean, I'll write and rewrite something a couple times and then try and put the words in different places. I mean, all of that does make a difference on and it's no different than a comedian.
We'll blame your English teacher mom for
the
rewording.
The rewording, exactly right.
Do you diagram that?
Right,
sentence?
Yeah, right. No, but I mean, comedians will talk about it too, where they'll write a joke out and then they'll rewrite it and go and put different words in different places. And it's just interesting, you know, how a sentence or a word will get a reaction from a crowd when a comedian does it, right? And so trying to tap into that, and so no, that it's always been fun to do that.
You ever thought about doing stand-up?
I did it briefly just for fun. I love public speaking, so I love the stage.
See, that's what most people hate, including me.
Really?
And I've been around media and particularly on the radio or now on this podcast for years.
Right.
But that, to me, that's easy, because I'm either talking to myself
when
I do monologues, which is really bizarre if you think about it, or talking with like one other person, maybe two or three, but usually one other person. Easy. Get up in front of people, all those eyes staring at you. I can't handle it. I think I think partly it's my ADD, because
that could be. I mean,
I'm not that I'm officially diagnosed, but I'm either ADD or ADHD or something, because I'm like squirrel. What was I saying? All these people are looking at me.
Right.
That one guy over there looks really funny, and I can't stop thinking about it.
No, to me it's like riding a wave. It's like surfing, right? And the ups and the downs. And when you're in front of an audience and you say something funny and you get that reaction, I mean, it's like an endorphin rush, a serotonin hit like no other. And so the comedian side, I did it a little bit, but it can be a seedy, weird place. And as a married guy with 3 daughters, like staying out till 1 or 2 in the morning and in clubs. And I mean, that's a pretty long, tough road to do that. Yeah. And
if you want to really make a name for yourself.
If you want to make it right. And for me, it was always just about, hey, I'd like to get more comfortable telling jokes while I'm giving a talk. And I love giving talks. There's something about being in front of people that's just invigorating. And you go home and you're just riding this buzz for like 2-3 days after. That part's been fun. And actually Twitter's allowed me to do that, where people go and say, hey, can we have you out at our thing, at our event? And so who knows where it goes. I'm not going crazy with it just because I'm gone so much already with being gone from the family. But it is fun to do a few a year and kind of develop those skills and build those muscles.
So back to your family.
Yes.
I know oftentimes people say, well, I'm not going to push my kids to do one thing or another. They can choose to do what they want to do based on their interests and their gifts. But so I'm going to step past that and say, okay, I'm assuming that's probably what you think about your daughters as well. Or are you going to force them to become dairy farmers? No choice.
Shove it down their throats. Shove it down their throats. This is what you're doing.
So anyway, I'm taking that as a given.
Yes.
But what's your prediction?
Oh.
Will any of them continue?
Oh.
Do you see any, do they get out on the farm and work with the cows or anything at all?
Right. My oldest daughter, Layla, she loves animals. And so she's expressed she wants to be a vet or vet tech. And she absolutely loves that. She's got a heart for it. So I think her gift and calling would be in veterinarian. Middle daughter loves teaching, teaches all her sisters, teaches the chickens. She holds classes.
For the chickens?
For the chickens,
What does she teach the chickens?
She reads to them. She reads books to the chickens.
Has she got any talking chickens yet?
No, I'm hoping, because Daddy wants to retire. So if you could expedite that. If you could expedite the talking chicken business.
That's on your daughter.
Right. Yeah. So she has a heart for teaching. I could see her doing that. And then my youngest, she's verbose, wild, crazy. I think she might have the ability to do it. It's interesting because oftentimes parents that are business owners don't want their kids to be business owners themselves, because they know the hours, they know the struggles, they know the turmoil, and they actually push their kids into being doctors, dentists, working at the post office, something safe, right? Yeah. Exactly. And yet to me, life is about struggle. There's joy in struggle. There's joy in that. And so I would allow them to do it. But if I had to guess, I think my youngest has the probably tenacity to be a business owner and to run a farm or run a dairy.
That's an outstanding point about playing it safe. I think it really comes down to the person. Some people are meant to play it safe. They can't handle.
Certainly.
And I used to not.
Right.
More and more, I'd probably put myself into that category. I deal with stress somewhat, but there's only so much I can handle. My mental health will only take me so far, and I have to be honest with that. I can't just do you know, I couldn't do what you do.
No.
Keep all those plates spinning. I would lose it.
Right.
But other people, they need that.
That's right.
And if you're too safe, you're dying because you're just unstimulated.
Right, exactly. And I have a little bit of ADHD myself, undiagnosed, but I need chaos.
Yeah.
I need a million things going on. I need a bunch of things going wrong.
And then you have that at a dairy farm.
That's right. And you have that,
Period.
right? You do, right? And it takes a certain person to put yourself through that, right? And we go and create a budget for the year. We've never had a budget that was, within $500,000 of the January 1 budget. Well, how do you operate, under those circumstances, right? With that much uncertainty in your business, how do you operate, right? How do you function? And I would venture that a lot of business people are a little bit crazy anyway, right? Yeah. They're the rookie basketball team that doesn't know they shouldn't win, right?
You could win big or you could lose really big.
Absolutely. There's challenges, right? Yeah. And so there's a little bit of insanity, I think, in all business owners, but all dairy farmers too, just because of the challenges. But with challenge and struggle comes meaning, and it doesn't, and that struggle doesn't have to be on the scale that I have or that somebody else has. But I think if we can look at struggle and say that, hey, this is meaning in life for us, and this is our cross to bear, and we've accomplished something at the end of the day, then that can provide joy in life.
Well, thanks for having me out here to the farm.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
Yeah, sharing your depth of knowledge. I like it that you geek out about some of the history of it and the nutrition and all that stuff. That's same as me. Those are the things going through my head. And sometimes I talk to people and they resonate, and sometimes I talk to people and they're like, "You're crazy. Why do you think about all that stuff?" I just live my life. I'm like, I can't live my life without thinking about that kind of stuff. Right. And what is going to happen? What is the trajectory of humanity and food and energy? And
some of those macro things are just, and we're going through some crazy times right now, and it's going to be interesting to see where it all goes. So,
well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate your story too.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Dylan. Thank you.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast. These are the stories of the people who grow your food.